Hi, boys and girls. I hope all of you are having a great day so far. We are going to continue looking at nonfiction elements this week, and we'll be looking at a few other things you'll find out about too. So let's get going. Our lesson today is going to be centered around author's purpose, why an author wrote what he did. But before we get into that, let's do some review from yesterday's nonfiction elements. Let's first review the nonfiction elements. Take a look at each one. I'll give you a moment to do that, and then I'll share the answers with you. Heading, table of contents, glossary, caption, picture or photograph, index. Good job. Author's purpose. You can see here that you have a capital P, an I, and an E. And those three letters together spell the word pie, don't they? That's going to help us remember what author's purpose is by looking at the author's purpose pie, P-I-E. When we are studying and looking at a text and wondering which purpose the author chose, they may have chosen the first purpose, persuade. Can you say that with me? Persuade. Here, the author writes to get you to do something or believe something or what they said. You will find when an author's purpose is to persuade that it might be an advertisement, maybe a letter, or a campaign speech. I know that every commercial, basically, the author of that commercial was definitely to persuade you to buy or get something, right? Let's look at the I, the author's purpose to inform. When the author has the purpose to inform, the author writes to give you information about a topic. Over here, you'll find when they inform, it may be an encyclopedia, an article, a biography, a textbook. That's when the author would have the purpose to inform, to teach you something. And then we have the E. That is for entertain. And entertain is something where people really enjoy, what they're doing. And an author often writes stories and other things to have the reader just simply be entertained. It says here, the author writes to tell you a story that you will enjoy. Over here, it may be poetry is where the author's purpose would be to entertain. Lots of poetries. It makes you feel funny or happy or sad, but it's definitely entertainment. Fiction, a story. Most stories are the author's purpose would be to entertain. A fairy tale. We know fairy tales aren't real, but they sure are make great books, don't they? Maybe a script would be to entertainment, for a play that someone's going to put on. So those are the three purposes that authors write. Let's take a look at our book from last week, the story Pen Pals. Think about that book for a moment, and let's see what we think the author may have had in mind or had purposed in writing that book. What was the author's purpose for writing the book Pen Pals? Was it A, to inform, B, to entertain, or C, to persuade? If you said entertain, you're absolutely right. Pen Pals was a story and it was just meant for us to enjoy it, and I think we all did. Let's now look at our text for this week. As we continue to read our book this week, all about astronauts, I want you to think about why did the author write this book? What was his purpose? Was it to inform? Will you learn things? Was it to entertain? You just enjoyed it? Or was it to persuade you, to get you to do something or buy something or feel something? So let's look at the text and be thinking about what the author's purpose was. Astronaut training. By the way, what do we call that? If you said heading, you're absolutely right. It's going to tell us more about what we're going to read. So we know here we're going to learn about the training that astronauts have. After college, astronauts go to special classes to learn more about spaceflight. They learn about rockets, the stars, and the planets. They learn about their special missions too. Neil Armstrong and his team of astronauts studied the moon before their special mission. They learned about the rocks they might find there. Some astronauts are pilots. They know how to fly airplanes. During this astronaut training, they learn how to fly a spacecraft. They use special models to practice flying the spacecraft. A reminder, boys and girls, make sure you have the eyes on the text and that you are tracking with your eyes or something else that you're using to track. Try to read the words with me. Let's continue. During training, astronauts learned how to wear a spacesuit. There is no air in space, so the suit has air tanks to help an astronaut breathe. The spacesuit is very big and bulky. An astronaut learns how to move in the suit by going into a pool. Moving around underwater feels like moving around in space. Oh, I see some text over here too. I always need to look at all the text on the page and read it because those pieces are there for a purpose. So this text says, these astronauts are training underwater in a pool at the Johnson Space Center. What do we call that nonfiction element? That's right, it's a caption. It's telling you about the photograph there. I may not have known that they were in a pool, but the caption told me. Chapter 4, on the spacecraft. There's another nonfiction element. Do you remember what it's called? That's right, it's a chapter title, or you could even call it a heading. But what it does is it lets you know what you're going to read about. So now we're going to read about spacecraft, aren't we? Eyes on your text, and let's begin. On Earth, a force called gravity pulls us toward the ground. On the moon and out in space, there is little or no gravity. When the spacecraft flies into space, the things inside float around unless they are tied down. The astronauts have to eat food from special packages. The packages are tied to a tray so the food doesn't float away. I see some text up in the upper right corner. It says, in a spacecraft, 3 astronauts have fun floating around. What nonfiction element is that? You got it. It's a caption, isn't it? It tells you what the photograph is about. Let's continue to read. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts float too, if they are not tied down. When the astronauts want to sleep or exercise, they wear a special strap, like a seatbelt, that holds them in place. Sometimes the astronauts need to do work outside the spacecraft. They put on their spacesuits and take a spacewalk. Temperatures in space can be very hot or very cold. So an astronaut wears special underwear called the spacesuit. Small tubes run through the underwear. Water is pumped through the tubes to warm or cool the astronaut. So now that we read a chunk of our text, review what author's purpose is, PIE, persuade, inform, entertain, and read what it says underneath each of those. Then we're going to ask our question. The question is, what was the author's purpose for writing the book all about astronauts? Was it A, to inform, B, to entertain, C, to persuade? Great. Yes, the answer was to inform, to teach us something about astronauts and how they become astronauts. Good job. The last page in the book says glossary. Do you remember as we reviewed our elements of nonfiction what a glossary is? A glossary are vocabulary words and their definitions. It's like a mini dictionary. And if you notice, these words are put in alphabetical order, just like a dictionary. Let's read those terms and their definitions. And I want you to also be thinking, why would an author write a glossary for a book? What would the author's purpose be for that? College, a school where students can study after high school. Gravity, a force that pulls people towards Earth. Mission, a special job for an astronaut. Spacecraft, a machine that flies into space. Spacesuit, special clothing that an astronaut wears for space flights. The question is, what is the purpose of a glossary? Is it A, to help the reader identify the characters in the story? Or B, to help the reader know which page or pages that word can be found? Or is it C, to help the reader know the meaning of specific words in a book? Choose your answer now. Did you choose C, to help the reader know the meaning of specific words in a book? If you did, you're absolutely right. Good job. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.